Well, I think it's a nice roster. I think it's the thing that jumps out at me. It's got pretty good depth on it. I like some of the versatility and some of the depth. The ceiling, don't know. I still think that if I look at the division, we'll start there because that's where it all starts. And I think they're deeper than any team in the division, and I would probably make them the favorite because um, what's difficult is you don't know how the season's going to play out with injuries.
We're just 9 days away from the start of the season. Actually, we're less than that. We're 6 days away. We're going to go with the Thursday night showdown between the Rams and the Bills. Here to talk all things NFL with us with an Eagle slant. Always brings great perspective as a former league executive. Guy worked in the league for years. His Landry football website is as good to find. Talking about the National Football League. Chris Landry joins us here on Birds 365. Been a good couple of weeks, Chris. How'd your summer go?
Fast. It went pretty fast. It always does. As I'm getting older, the time's moving faster, and I almost think, yeah, I'm ready for it, but I'm not really ready. I'd like to have a little bit more preparation time, but it's always a great time of year to kick off the football season and got the college season week one this week, and then obviously the NFL starting next, as you mentioned, Thursday and next weekend. Going to be an interesting year, as it always is.
Always is, Chris, and we'll start it in Philadelphia because that's where we are.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen a lot of 53 man over your time. You look at this Eagles group they put together. What do you think the ceiling is for this team?
Well,
Are they a legitimate contender?
Well, I think it's a nice roster. I think it's the thing that jumps out at me. It's got pretty good depth on it. I like some of the versatility and some of the depth. The ceiling, don't know. I still think that if I look at the division, we'll start there because that's where it all starts. And I think they're deeper than any team in the division, and I would probably make them the favorite because um, what's difficult is you don't know how the season's going to play out with injuries, and I don't really trust Dallas, and I don't think the Giants in Washington are good enough. But beyond the division, I don't know how good this team can be. It really is going to come down to the quarterback and how good he can be. I think that if it was a great team, which this team is not, then he could be solid, play good ball, and we'll see where it goes. I see there's some playmakers. I see there's some capabilities, but it really is going to go to the way to the quarterback, and that'll determine the ceiling. I would say they're a team that's got a good chance to win the division. Again, forecasting games, that are going to take place in December, January is tough. But I would say that they'd probably be one of those teams, anybody that wins this division, probably not somebody that's going to advance deep, although I will say the NFC is a little bit more wide open. I think the AFC's it's got better teams in it. So, yeah, I don't know that I like anybody in the East to really challenge as the best team in the NFC. That's the way I see it now. I'll see going forward, if that changes, of course.
That's exactly where I was going next. I think the NFC, in comparison to the AFC, is left wanting, that it just pales in comparison. Who are the teams in the NFC that you say, well, the Eagles got a chance to win the division, but not go deep in the playoffs? Who are those NFC teams that you are suggesting have the kind of rosters, have the kind of depth, have the kind of talent that can go deep in the playoffs and end up in the Super Bowl out of the NFC?
Well, I would look at, say, like, for example, in the West, I think the Rams have a better quarterback. I think the Niners have a better roster. I trust them a little bit more right now than I would the Eagles, although, again, things can change. In the North, I'm not – I think Green Bay's kind of in that mold of it's Aaron Rodgers, and, would I trust, them over the Eagles in a game? Yeah, I would, but because I don't think the Packers roster is good enough to go that far anyway. I think the South is interesting to me. It really depends upon the health of the offensive line for the Bucs. they're good enough to be really competitive, and the Saints have a really good roster. The quarterback situation's a little bit of a concern, but if I were going to take the comparison, I think the Saints roster is better. They've got better pass rushers. So I would again in an NFC that I'm not really excited about jumping on the table for anybody. I still wouldn't put the Eagles as the two or three of the teams right now that I think, yeah, they're as good as those teams. I think they're below them right now.
You bring up the Saints in that roster, Chris. So I want you to put your coaching hat on now more than your executive hat. In this, that the Eagles were able to get a member of that talented Saints secondary, C.J. Gardner Johnson, with essentially 10 days before the start of the season. He's played mostly slot corner, nickel back. The Eagles want to make him a safety. The Eagles want him out there week one. How difficult is it to get somebody in a new scheme, new building, new position, ready to go in 10 days in the modern NFL?
Well, it's challenging, but it's what you got to do. What you've got to do is utilize him and what he does well. He does really good job on the slide. He's got versatility. So I think you don't have to like. There's not a simple way of, well, this is what we're going to do, and then it's turn on the switch. It's going to be a gradual process, but I think there's some similarities I think in how they're going to play him relative to what he's done in the past. So I think the transition will be fairly smooth, but I don't expect him to have his best games immediately. Good player, like him a lot. From a roster standpoint, just from the Saints' viewpoint, why would they move on from him? Because they've got depth, and they may end up regretting it. But I think, he wanted to get a longer-term deal and wanted to get a deal, and so that wasn't going well. So I think they felt like, well, we'll get anything for him now because we're going to lose him in a year. Well, they may or may not regret not having him this year. Now, for the Eagles, I think he's a good player, but now, they've got to think, if they get him, then it's probably going to cost them more than they think right now to get a deal done with them, or else it could be a short-term deal with the Eagles. So I think it's a lot of, what does it mean to the team now? It really helps the Eagles. It doesn't hurt the Saints a great deal, although it could if they start to have guys drop in the secondary.
All right. I want to ask you about one of those teams you threw into the mix as NFC potential to go with distance squads, and that's the San Francisco 49ers. My partner is a bigger Shanahan fan than I am. I think he's a good coach. John thinks he might be the best coach in the NFC. I think he's actually put himself in a precarious position this year with the way he's handled the whole quarterback situation. I get they want to move on to Trey Lance. That's their call. They use the number 3 pick in the draft. You got to give him a shot at some time. You want to do it cut and dry and move on, go for it. But then to bring Garoppolo back, a guy who's taken you to a Super Bowl, a guy who's taken you to a championship game just the year before, if Trey Lance has a bad game, all of a sudden it's going to bubble. You're a guy who's been around football teams before. I've followed him from outside looking in, but you don't think there's a chance for a split in that locker room? The first time Trey Lance goes 12 of 26 for 186 yards and a pick and no touchdowns, you don't think that could be something that blows up in the 49ers' face this year?
Well, I think that's why they did it, Jody. So here's the situation that's a little different. And I don't think it's cookie cutter. This is a good roster. It's a good team. And it's not without their question marks. They're really good. And so they're not like a team that's trying to build towards the future that is, not good enough this year. They're good enough to compete and win that division. Whether they will or not, I don't know. We'll see. So the whole situation comes down to this. And I think they obviously moved up to draft Trey Lance for a reason. They like him. They think he's the future. Time will tell on that. I think with Garoppolo, the plan was to trade him. Probably due a large part due to the injury. They couldn't get trade value for him. So as this has gone on through the process, they said, look, here's some of the thing, and his agent knows that. Garoppolo's agent knows that there's not a big market for him right now. So why don't we do this? Let's restructure a deal. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. If you come in, Trey Lance could play poorly, Jody. He could get injured the first play of the game.
True.
You got Garoppolo, and you still got a contender. It's not a disaster. And if you play well and you're like have a great year, look at this. You can earn all your money back. It's incentive laden. But here's the other thing, too. We'll still look for a trade partner for you because somebody's quarterback that's a contender might go down the next 4 weeks. The trade is still in play if they have. So it to me, it's just not if people say, well, you got to trade them. We can't just trade them. You got to have somebody that wants them. You got to get something of value. So what this does, in my view, it gives the Niners flexibility. It gives the Niners a guy they can turn to that they've won with, that let's call it like it is. They think he's got a ceiling that's, limited, pretty low, that they'd like better. But is Trey Lance ready now? I mean, it gives them insurance. And look, Kenny, you can lose the locker room for a lot of things. I don't think they will. I think there are a lot of people that kind of like Jimmy G that think he's pretty good, and I think people see what Lance can do. Can he run the offense well enough? Look, I think they teach the running game as good as anybody in football.
Anybody.
This is a running team that's going to be able to marginalize the quarterback as much as you possibly can. You can't hide the quarterback, but you can run it. You can work those in cuts, easy routes. So whether it's Lance who's trying to learn or whether it's Jimmy G who's got some limitations, you've got two now. And then if you get something of value, because again, if somebody goes down with an injury, they need a quarterback in the worst way. In their contender, they would get more than what they're able to get now. So I think it gives them a lot of flexibility, and I think they do a really good job. I think that roster is really good. So that's kind of how I see it. I don't know how it's going to play out. They don't know how it's going to play out because it's not just as simple as, look, if Trey Lance is the starter and he becomes great this year, which I don't expect that, but if he clearly is the guy, well, they've got a veteran backup for a team that's a contender. What if Lance goes down and misses 4 weeks? You've got a guy you can turn to. You're a contender. You stay in the mix. So you've got that. If Lance is not ready and, he struggles and you got to put Jimmy G in, well, the rosters, the locker room is going to want, hey, look, we're a good team and he's not ready. Then you put the veteran in, you go with him, and then, you know what you've got with Garoppolo and you know what you don't have. So I think it's unfair. There's some people that think that it was smart for a contending team like the Niners to hold on to Garoppolo. A lot of people said, why would you trade? Well, if you got something of value, you probably make the move. And, I don't think it's your obligation as an organization to do right by the player. I think you do right by the team. Yep. But I think that they were trying to look and say, look, here's our guy. I think it's risky to say it's Trey Lance and we're not looking back and Jimmy G's gone. We're going to dump him for anything. I don't think that's a real prudent move. Personally, I think keeping him makes sense, provided they're able to do it. It did not make sense in my mind to have him on the previous contract on the opening day roster where you guarantee almost 28 million. Yeah. That's where, to me, the Niners, I think they did the perfect thing for them, and we'll see where it plays out. But they can go in either direction now.
You piqued my interest with the 49ers, Chris, because I love their running game. I love the schemes. I love the talent that Kyle is able to put together. So you, as a talent evaluator, and this is where I'll put the Philadelphia tint on there. When they give up on Trey Sermon, a third-round pick in 2021, what does that tell you? In that running system with that success, is that raise a red flag to you?
here's what it tells me, and here's what I think you got to know about that. That I do not in any way want to minimize the running backs that have been in that system, but that is a running back friendly offense. What it means is they'll just replace him with another young guy that they feel is as good or better, and they will do that consistently. If you look at them, the names change, but the production is still pretty good. I don't think he's a great back. I think he's a good back. I think he's versatile. I think he can really help you in spots. But I think that the running back position for them is very fungible. I mean, they can move around that. So what it tells me is they're comfortable with what they have, and we'll just, we're going to move on because we know second contracts for running backs are not going to be likely for the Niners
But
because
they
they
only
feel they
got
can.
1 year out of him, Chris.
I know.
That
Yeah.
is the concerning part for me. I agree
Well,
with you with the
yeah,
second contract.
I'm going to tell you, they like their other backs better. Okay, they like their other backs better, but it's fungible, meaning they can just they can't just put anybody there. That's not it. But they more than most don't need that feature. This is not the Titans, and we got to just do whatever we do to get Derrick Henry. They can put a lot of guys in there. What it tells you as an Eagle fan is, look, they liked him, and he had a good camp. They like the other guys better, and they feel the future might be better with them with these other guys. Now, it doesn't mean they're right. So, what does it mean for the Eagles? Is they've got a back that's got some versatility. He's pretty good. He's not going to light it up, but I think he can be successful. That's what you got. I mean, I wouldn't overthink it. It's this is not like, oh, there's anything sinister. He doesn't work hard. There's a problem or anything. I don't sense that at all. They said he had a really good camp. They said he played very well. They just like the other guys better.
Chris, let me ask you about one of the other teams in the NFC the Eagles will probably have to deal with if they make the playoffs this year, and that's the defending Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. Is it a media creation? Is it a fan creation? Are we just looking at the results and judging it and giving it whatever weight we think it should when statements like it's difficult to repeat are made? I know, I've said it. I base it basically on there aren't that many teams that get back to the Super Bowl, even though they were good enough to make it the year before. That's what we base predictions on going forward for the next year. Well, how good were they last year? How good a roster did they have? But is there something to the mental aspect of been there, done that, got it done, had to invest every single ounce of emotion and focus, whatever, to get a championship done? Is it harder the next year? Or is that just something that a guy like me has made up?
No, it is harder. I mean, let's go back into what I call the old days. You guys can remember, and a lot of people in the audience will remember. Some may be a little young, but it was pretty common that Steelers were likely going to come back the next year. And, I mean, those days you return the same team unless you had an aging team that few guys that retired and you had to bring in young guys and there was a drop-off tape. But you pretty much you could look at it and say, those are the teams that are coming back. What happens now is the better you are, it depends upon how your roster's structured. You usually, and particularly if you're a team that's maybe signed guys to one-year deals that make an impact to you winning, maybe it's a good pass rusher, maybe they're gone. They leave for greener pastures because they get more money. They take advantage of, we won the Super Bowl. So you don't have the same team. You're not repeating. There's no such thing as repeating. I mean, there's no such thing as defending champion. You don't defend it. There is such thing as repeating. You don't defend anything. You won it last year and you start over this year. And Jody, yeah, you're right. It's the core of the team may stay, but what about some of the key components that are not there? I mean, are they going to miss a certain pass rusher? You got Aaron Donald. And so now the other thing is, think about this for a second. We don't think about it enough. The regular season ends. Okay, you're right around the, holiday time, right around the first of the year. Season's over for teams that don't make the playoffs. The teams that go into the playoffs, that advance all the way to the Super Bowl, they're practicing and prepping the entire month of January, an entire month. Now, I know we don't put the pads on in scrimmage like we used to, but the off season is shorter.
Correct.
So what happens if you're really good over time and you go deep, then you're over 3 years, you've played almost an extra season when you throw it on top of that because you're practicing your preparation. So you combine the fact that you've got a shorter offseason, body recovery. You tend to see more injuries in the year after that because maybe your body is not as prepared. The other thing is we just talked about guys leaving. And then you do have the little bit of okay, we got there, we won it. Is the motivation just the same? You want to think it is. Everybody says it is. But there is I don't know, there's something to the fact that you may be really committed to winning it again, but somebody's trying to get that next step. So if you're the Chiefs who've won one a couple of years ago and you're kind of getting there, you're the Bills, or are they more motivated than the Bills, or the Bills got a little bit more of we want to get them back? And there's, I think all of those things are in the mix, Jody and John, and have an effect on, repeating. It's difficult. There's no question about that. And people will gun for you. I mean, they're got the Bills. You think the Bills are, of course, the Bills and the Rams are going to be motivated to start off the season with a win, of course, but everybody's going to be looking at that as a litmus test. We beat the Rams. We beat the team that won it last year. It is a little bit, more of you're a target than as opposed to can you work your way and win it. I think that's a big factor.
Want to get your thoughts on those Buffalo Bills, the varsity, the AFC side of the bracket, Chris. I think Buffalo is settled in as sort of the favorite. We'll see if they recover. That was a devastating loss, by the way. We'll see if they recover from that. The AFC West looks loaded as a whole. The Miami Dolphins, I got to see a lot of talent on that team. I don't know if Jody's a big Tua fan. Give us your thoughts on the AFC and maybe the favorites and some teams that could surprise.
I was doing a show a little bit earlier, and I thought about something, and it came up, and it's an example of as we go into the league and we're looking at 17 games, excuse me, and the importance of them and everything. That was a difficult loss for Buffalo. You know what comes to my mind though is how they lost to Jacksonville, and how that game probably cost them home field advantage. Would it have been different? I don't know. The result might have been the same, but it's little things like that. So for Buffalo, I think their roster is as good as anybody in the league. I think the quarterback's outstanding. Took a big leap last year. Like this team, at all aspects. They've got to make sure that they finish. They lost a game to Pittsburgh that's probably, that's a game it looked like they were better, but you have to be better. It doesn't matter if you're better. You have to be the better team that week. You got to prepare. There's a consistency, because I think it's important to get home field event. Doesn't guarantee you anything. It just puts you in better position. So that's the thing with Buffalo. Can the intangibles and the finish is going to be key. The division is going to be fun. I am curious about Miami. How much better can they be? They're explosive. Can they take that step? Everybody's writing off New England. I think Miami's more explosive. New England's pretty good defensively. The preseason is a disaster. Everybody's burying them. I wouldn't be quick to do that, but I'm very curious to see how that plays out. And so I think the Jets are getting better. I still think that maybe New England and Miami are a little better. So that the East is going to be fun. Are going to be fun. I really am looking forward to it. To see how dominant can they be? Can they be a team in that division that just controls it early? I think they'll win it. But, again, I think home field advantage, best record in the AFC is kind of it's the second goal. Winning your division is the first goal, but the process of that is, I don't know. I was thinking about that earlier. Is can you sweep that division? Go 5-1. 5-1 will probably be good enough to put you in a position to win. Because here's the thing about it: if you're Buffalo, you're going to be really good. You need to win the best record in the AFC. You got Kansas City in a tougher division. Going 5-1 in the West of the AFC is really, really tough.
Yeah.
5-1 in the East, you probably need to do that if you're Buffalo. Now it's not, the out of conference schedule. So I think that to me is what I'm looking at, and I'm looking at how much better can Miami could be, and then will New England slip or just be steady as she goes and not good enough? I think that's going to be fun to watch in that division.
Chris, last one for me, and I usually try and keep a close eye on this. Maybe the answer is there isn't going to be one. There always seems to be something that pops up in the preseason that the NFL tells us to keep our eye out for, that they're going to call differently coming into the year, that the referees have been instructed to call differently, to emphasize, that's the word they use, put an emphasis on. And then they do it in the preseason. Everybody goes, no, wait, that wasn't a penalty in years gone by. And then they, as the season goes on, they trim back on what they were calling in preseason. I don't remember any of that this year. And am too big a football geek to not watch preseason. Yeah, I do watch preseason. Makes me a football nerd. Fine. Did I miss it? Is there anything that's going to be affected early in the season? The referees are going to call differently that people are going to be screaming at their TV about?
No, it's really more of what they have emphasized in the past and how they're going to, what the college they call targeting, but leading with the head. Here's one thing, though, that jumps to my mind that they didn't say this, but I'm thinking that this is going to be brought up. And it's always reactionary, I know, but it is something that college has adopted that I think the NFL might, because everything is safety. The play in the Cincinnati game, basically, it's what's called the low block within the tackle box is allowable.
Thaddeus Moss, right?
Right. That is legal where it took place. It is not legal outside the tackle box. In college, it's illegal to do that, and I think that is something they'll look at. But I don't think it's going to be, to your point, be emphasized, because it's the rule is the rule. What I'm saying is I think that's something they'll look at and say, a lot of traffic there, because everything they do is to safety, right? And I think that's something that they'll look at. That's the only thing that I see, but that's not going to be emphasized. I think that could be studied and looked at, and I don't know. They may, say no, we like it where it is. But I think this offseason they'll look at that.
Yeah, Thaddeus Moss. I think a lot of tight ends, Clay Harbor, the ex-Eagles tight end, said, "Hey, we're taught to do that. That wasn't a dirty play."
No, it wasn't dirty. It wasn't dirty. It was absolutely right. And that is, I think, my point, or maybe their point is, look, it's dangerous. It's let's take it out of if it's illegal at the other parts of the field, make it legal here, because then what it does, it's judgment. Now that was pretty easy, but you get a little bit in the tackle about it. I just think that's something, my experience with them, that'll be something that they'll look at. I don't know what they'll decide, but I think they'll look at it.
Yeah. Chris, great stuff. We appreciate it. Whenever you come on the board, you give us a different perspective. We like to get people from outside Philadelphia every once in a while to give us a different perspective. You always do. We're going to let them get a month or so under their belt, get the games played, everybody else get a feel for it. Then we want to get you back on again. We appreciate you jumping in with us today. Thank you much, sir.
Hey, thanks to you and all your listeners. Appreciate it. Let's do it again soon. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.